It's here, boys! RTX 3080 in the flesh. We're gonna take it out of the box today. I've actually already unboxed it. I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait for you guys, so I already looked at it. I know, terrible, shame on me. But I'm gonna just walk you through the experience more or less, just so you get an idea of what we got going on here. Obviously, I've already cut open the tape on both sides, and boom, there it is. What's really interesting about this, what struck me as kind of unique about this particular card, I think this is the first time that we've actually been presented with the back side of the card first. This is like where the back plate usually is. See the PCI Express connector's right there, whereas usually it's the other way around, but that's just because Nvidia's really kind of gone inverted on the design this time around. So, it's for the record, it's incredibly heavy. I think that's the first thing I realized when I picked up the box, was that it felt like there were two GPUs in here, and that's all heatsink. For the most part, I'd say like 90% of the weight of this thing is the fatty old heatsink. This ain't your grandma's heatsink. I don't know why your grandma would have a heatsink. This ain't your regular GPU heatsink. This is beefy. You could grill a steak on this. Look at this thing. It's really, really nice though. It's got like sort of a matte black finish. I'm gonna sit down. I don't know if it's powder coated or what, but it feels nice, it looks nice, and it weighs a ton. But that's good. At least all the weight is due to the cooling that Nvidia's put on here, and not for something else that's not quite as useful. And you can see that we've got two fans, right? There's been a lot of talk about the cooler design because it's very unique this time around. There's one fan there, and that fan it pushes air through the heatsink, and then it gets exhausted all out the back. Look at that opening. Boom, that's wide. While we're back here, you've also got 3 display ports, 1 HDMI 2.1 port. Oh, we'll get to test that out later. So all of the air that gets pulled through this fan and pushed through the fin stack on this side gets exhausted right out the rear. And then on the other side, at first glance, it looks like there's no fan, but it's on the other side. And you can tell that this fan's actually a completely different design than this one. The fan blades are totally different. This one looks a bit more normal, and this one has kind of like a swooping design. It should be noted that this fan actually goes, it looks like it would go this way and actually like push air downward, but it goes the opposite way, and it pulls air from the bottom just like this fan does, but because it's on the opposite side, it has to spin the opposite direction to do that. And it's a flow-through design. So if you take a look, actually I have a handy dandy light right here. I'm gonna turn this light on and just take a look. You can just see clear through, straight shot through the GPU. You can really see the where the V-shaped design of the PCB ends, like right there, because you can't see anything over here. This is all just covered by the actual back plate. But here it's wide open, and you can even see the 4 massive heat pipes, kind of the outlines or the silhouettes of those heat pipes. They're going all the way to the end of the card, and they are thick. I don't know if Nvidia already mentioned how big they are, but they look like they could be around 10, maybe even 12 millimeters. That's a semi-educated guess because I used to have, I still do, but I used to have larger gauges, double zeros in my ears, and those were 10 millimeters. And when I looked at these heat pipes up close, it really looked like they were about the same size as those plugs. And that is how I scientifically measure things. Here's a look from the other side where you can easily see where the PCB ends and the rest of the fin stack begins. I know there have been some other board partners that have done flow-through designs like this in the past. It's been a while, but I know that they exist. I can't remember off the top of my head who's done it, but this is definitely a first for Nvidia. And I guess we'll see how that works out for them when we can actually talk about performance of this card. Let's take a look at the rest of it. We'll do a little walk around. Starting with this side, we've got our fan here. And if you look, actually I'm gonna keep using this light because you can kind of see some stuff in here. Over here on this side, you don't see anything because it's just the copper plate. I'm guessing it's copper, but whatever base plate they're using that's making direct contact with the GPU, that's pretty much blocking any sort of visibility here. And also the fins going all around this fan don't actually go all the way down to the PCB. They're actually very short fins. You can see the difference here between these fins that go all the way down and these ones that just kind of end really quickly. I'm sure they still have some functional purpose and still aid in heat dissipation and whatnot, but they're definitely different than the other fins that we see on the card. If you look over here, you can see the larger fins and you can actually see through them slightly. There's a heat pipe right there, which also looks to be matte black. I think the inside of this card, when we actually get to tear it apart, is gonna look pretty nice. Pretty nice for the inside of a GPU. I was kind of expecting just like, regular nickel plated or unfinished piping like we usually see in a lot of cards, but Nvidia has definitely paid attention to the aesthetics inside and out of this GPU. I do see a MOSFET in there. See that little guy? So that's about where the power delivery on the card is on the PCB. Because you can see obviously the PCB ends right there, and you've got this rest of the card that's just heatsink. So the power delivery starts right about here, I would say. And then, like I said, we can't really see much of the PCB beyond that. But we do have an idea of how it's all assembled on the PCB, because Nvidia did share those 3D rendered images with the actual GPU surrounded by all that GDDR6X memory. They did a pretty good job, it seems, of cramming it all to one side of the PCB to make way for the rest of it for cooling purposes, but I'm sure Gamers Nexus will do an awesome teardown video of that in the near future. There's our 12-pin connector that's also new to the Nvidia cards, and it's only going to be on Nvidia cards. All the board partners will have the standard 8 pins that we're used to, and because of that, this card does come with an adapter. I already unboxed that as well, this little guy. So obviously it's a dual 8-pin female to a single 12-pin male adapter that is a little short, it's a little stubby. If you care about aesthetics, you're probably not going to be super thrilled with how this looks. It's kind of awkward. If you really wanted to tidy it up, you could probably zip tie it or maybe Velcro tie it really tight and then try to tuck it underneath the card. Ugh, one-handed struggles. Or if you mounted the GPU vertically, it would be much easier to hide, I think, because then you could just route it straight behind, you know, once you zip tie it and stuff. It actually wouldn't look terrible. I'm sure we're gonna see some third-party cables that come out that are nice and sleeved and stuff that are super long, that can route behind the motherboard tray before you have to plug in your 8-pin connectors, or even full-length cables that'll connect directly to your PSU. But as of now, this isn't really working for me. Look at that heat shrink. Disgusting. Next to that connector, we've got some Geforce RTX branding that looks to light up. It looks like there's some semi-opacity there, that there could very well be a white LED behind there. And speaking of lighting, there's also supposed to be some, like, I think around here, maybe it's on this side. Is it on both sides or maybe just one side? I would have to think it's on both. It would look kind of funny with one, but again, a lot of things that we can't really discuss or even look at today. That's the silly thing with these unboxings, but what can you do? So this is the backside again, which doesn't look like a backside at all. There are no visible screws on this side like you typically see, and I think that's because if you look closely, you can see some little covers, those little plates. I'm wondering if they're just like magnetic or what, but I guarantee you there are screws behind those plates. Honestly, I'd love to just pop one off and check right now, but that is forbidden for this video. We can't do any form of teardown. But let's see, there's another thing that I noticed. If you look on this side, so for starters, this kind of looks seamless, right? This whole kind of accent around this, I don't know, this anodized accent around the card. It looks completely seamless and looks like it's one piece, but it's actually not. So if you look here, I'm just gonna get my screwdriver so you can see a break, a clear break right there. There's another clear break here and one more right there. So this is like one piece. This is just a small, tiny piece that's completely disconnected from the rest of the assembly. And if you look over here, right in the middle, my camera is good enough. Be good enough, camera. Do better. Okay, that's probably the best you can see it. See the little divot? There's like a little indent in that piece right here. Most likely so you can take a small flathead or something and just wedge it in there and pop this piece off. And I think this piece is gonna reveal more screws or latches or whatever in order to start disassembling the card if you want to. Nvidia mentioned that tearing these down is kind of tricky and requires really clear instructions in order for you to not risk damaging the card. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'm not planning to water cool the RTX 3080, but the 3090, I think I'm pretty convinced that's going into Prometheus. Right now it's got that RTX 2080 Ti, which is, you know, just old news, completely outdated, such a terrible value. Geez, who would ever buy one of those? But I'm sure the teardown for that card is pretty similar to this one, so we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Let's see what else we can talk about here that won't get us in trouble forever. Oh, you know what? So we can't even plug this in. They said no plugging in of any kind, but they didn't say we couldn't hold it up inside of a system just to see what it looks like, right? Not plugging in. I am not plugging in, I repeat. So this is just my streaming system that I use for awesome hardware. Is my camera zoomed in? Oh, yes it is. Oh, look at that. Isn't that better? So this is sort of what it might look like in a system. Okay, pretty snazzy. But you know, the first time I held the GPU up like this in this system, I noticed something that could potentially cause an issue with these cards. You see how darn close the AIO tubes are to the fan? Like really, really close. And I think in this specific build, it would probably be fine with just a couple millimeters of clearance. But what if you're dealing with a slightly smaller case that's not quite as deep? What if you have to mount that front radiator closer to the GPU? That's gonna push the tubing further down and potentially hit those fan blades. Well, you could just move the radiator to the top of the case, that's true, and it might even be quieter because you wouldn't have all the air bubbles collecting at the top of the radiator as we saw in the Gamers Nexus video, but it's nice to have options. And for example, I was just working in Deepcool's new case, the CL500, which is a great chassis, lots of cooling potential and great for high-end hardware, but it only has a 240 millimeter mounting point for radiators at the top with 360 at the front. So if you were working in a case like that where you had more radiator support support at the front, you'd kind of be screwed if your AIO tubes interfered in that configuration and you were forced to downsize your radiator. It might even limit what CPU you can run in your system if you don't have the proper cooling for it. So it's one of those things that I don't know, I haven't heard many people talk about yet, and I guess you wouldn't really kind of think about it until you saw the card in there next to some hoses, just that close. The other potential issue with mounting your radiator at the top is that now you're directing hot air from the GPU straight into the radiator of your CPU. So that could potentially affect your CPU thermals negatively. That also ties in with what we've been hearing about air coolers with these cards. If you've got a fin stack or like a fin heatsink tower air cooler, well, guess what? The GPU is going to be exhausting hot air right next to it, and it's probably going to affect thermals in some way as well. You might have some fans up here, you know, exhausting, trying to pull that hot air away from the heatsink, but the heatsink is much closer to the GPU fan than those top fans are, and it's going to have the fan that's on your heatsink tower is going to have more influence of where this heat's going than your top fans will. So in that setup, I think you're going to have really good intake coming from the front to help alleviate that. Also, depending on how effective this fan is, if it's just like, you know, sucking up air like no one's business, does that leave this fan kind of in the dust? I mean, because look at this. Look at just how, I mean, obviously I have a capture card down there, but I mean, there's not a ton of room between the GPU and the PSU shroud. And if most of the fresh air from the front is being pulled in by this fan, then what does that mean for the cooling potential of this fan over here? I'm not sure. Oh, another bummer that I just thought of about this 12 pin, circling back really quick, is that what if you already have some super nice cables, whether they're sleeved or RGB, you already spent 30, 40, 50, I mean, people can spend $100 on these things, then you're kind of SOL. You've either got to buy a different set of cables or just go with a completely different card altogether. Do you think Lian Li is going to make a special streamer cable just for the 12 pin? I don't know. Might make it run faster. Now let's say you mounted the GPU vertically, something like this. Now you've got this fan blowing hot air straight at your motherboard, and that could potentially heat up your chipset. Our chipset temperature is going to be skyrocketing in that configuration? I don't know. I know this is all sounding very negative so far, but I'm really just trying to feel this thing out and see what potential issues it might cause. I'm really just speculating. Everything could be perfectly fine, but with a new design like this, there are obviously new things to think about. So I just want to put that on people's radar, put that on your radar, and that's the card. I really don't know what else to talk about at this point, so I'm going to end it here. Guys, RTX 3080, stay tuned for our full review. Or my full review. I'm alone. So sad. Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to toss a like before you head out, get subscribed and all that jazz, and I'll see y'all in the next video.